The Boston winter is unforgiving. Especially on the east side of the city, in the medical district where hospitals stand in a row, freezing winds blow between buildings, coloring the cheeks of passers-by red. Carol Hunter carefully wiped the hospital window, gazing at the snowy landscape outside. Her movements were skilled, evidence of her 12 years spent as part of the hospital's cleaning staff. Carol took pride in her work. The floors and windows she polished were part of the spaces where patients and families spent their most vulnerable moments. She believed her job wasn't just cleaning, but played an important role in creating a healing environment. Carol, once you've finished preparing the operating room on the 6th floor, could you please take care of the pediatric ward? Supervisor Janet stopped by and kindly asked. We're short on rotation this morning. The children like you the best. Of course, Carol replied with a smile. Working in the pediatric ward was her favorite. The pure smiles of the children warmed her heart even on the most exhausting days. As her afternoon shift neared its end, Carol's cell phone vibrated in her pocket. Looking at the screen, she saw a call from her sister, Vanessa. Carol took a deep breath, preparing herself before answering. Hello, Vanessa. Finally, you answer. Vanessa's voice always sounded somewhat irritated. I've called several times. I was working, Carol responded calmly. What's going on today? There's a final meeting about my and Thomas's wedding this Saturday, Vanessa hesitated before continuing. There's something I want to talk about in person. Can you come to my apartment at 7 tonight? Carol was surprised. It was unusual for Vanessa to want to see her. Of course. Will I get to see Olivia? Yes, she'll be there. There was something hesitant in Vanessa's voice. See you at 7. When the call ended, Carol remained still for a moment. Her relationship with Vanessa had always been complicated. Vanessa had walked a path opposite to Carol's. Vanessa had succeeded in the high fashion world and was currently a manager at an upscale boutique on Newbury Street. She valued appearance and social status above all else, and always seemed to look down on Carol's modest lifestyle. I should congratulate her, Carol reminded herself. Vanessa's fiancé, Thomas Reed, was an investment banker, socially considered a good match. However, Carol was concerned about the coldness she had sensed during their few meetings. Still, she couldn't help but wish for her sister's happiness. That evening, Carol arrived at Vanessa's luxury condominium. 8-year-old Olivia opened the door. Aunt Carol, the little girl jumped toward her. Carol embraced her warmly. Her relationship with Olivia was one of the great joys in her life. Hello. How's school? It's fun. I'm reading lots of new books. Olivia's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Olivia, do your homework. Vanessa's sharp voice came from the living room. Carol, come here. Mother's here too. Carol gently stroked Olivia's hair before heading to the living room. There sat Vanessa and their mother, Margaret. Carol, you're late, Margaret said coldly. Did you need time to prepare yourself to come here? Good evening, Mother, Carol maintained her smile. Work ran a little late. Yes. Your job, Margaret uttered the word job as if referring to something unpleasant. Sit down, Vanessa announced. She took a sip of wine and looked at Carol with a serious expression. We need to talk about the wedding. Carol sat down, bracing herself. She sensed something was about to happen. Carol, I don't want you to come to the wedding, Vanessa's words cut through the air like a sharp blade. Thomas's family and our social circle friends will be there. It would be embarrassing to have someone like you at the ceremony. Carol froze. She had anticipated something, but not such a direct rejection. What Vanessa means, Margaret intervened, is that this marriage is important for our social standing. Thomas's family is very conservative, and in their eyes. Having a hospital cleaning lady as a sister would be embarrassing, Carol said quietly. That's exactly right, Vanessa responded coldly. But I do need your help with something. I want you to look after Olivia on the wedding day. I'm planning to bring her to the ceremony, but there's no place for children during the reception. Carol was speechless. She wasn't invited, but she was needed as a babysitter. Do something useful for your family, Margaret coldly added. For your sister's special day. Something broke inside Carol's chest. She looked toward Olivia, who was reading a book in the hallway. The girl's sleeve had ridden up, revealing a bruise. It wasn't the first time she had seen it. Carol had noticed concerning bruises several times, and Olivia's occasional fearful expressions bothered her too. "All right," Carol said quietly. A plan was beginning to form in her head. "I'll take care of Olivia." Vanessa was visibly relieved, and Margaret smiled with satisfaction. They had forgotten the true meaning of family. Carol's eyes returned to Olivia. The girl sensed her gaze and returned a small, sad smile. Carol smiled quietly. On the wedding day, she planned to prepare a little surprise. It would start by tracking down the whereabouts of their father, George Hunter, who had been banished from the family 10 years ago. "What date is the wedding again?" Carol asked calmly. 3 weeks from Saturday, Vanessa answered. "I'll send you the details by email. But remember, absolutely do not come to the venue." "Don't worry," Carol answered quietly. "I understand my place." Carol sat in her small apartment living room, tracing memories from 10 years ago. Opening a photo album, she saw images of the family during happier times. George Hunter's gentle smile looked up at her from the pages. "Dad." Carol ran her finger over the photograph. George was a down-to-earth man who worked as a carpenter. His hands had aged with the wood, and his fingers bore countless small scars. Yet those same hands had gently embraced his daughters and stroked their hair. George was never wealthy, but he taught his daughters honesty and diligence. Carol especially resembled George. Both had plain appearances, lacking flashiness, but were warm-hearted. In contrast, Margaret and Vanessa valued beauty and social status. Carol vividly remembered that rainy night 10 years ago. Margaret and Vanessa had cornered George, berating him. "You have no ambition at all." Margaret's words stabbed sharply. "I could have had a much better life." "I don't want to be like you, Dad," 22-year-old Vanessa had declared. "You're a failure." George stood silently. His eyes reflected hurt and disappointment. Carol had tried to intervene, but her feeble protests were silenced by Margaret's anger. That night, George left home. Margaret had shouted, "Don't ever come back," and Vanessa coldly turned her back. Only Carol chased him to the doorstep. "Dad, where are you going?" "I don't know, Carol," George answered in a tired voice. "But I need a new beginning. You're a strong girl. We'll meet again someday." Those were his last words. George disappeared into the rain, vanishing from Carol's life. Margaret forbade mentioning his name, and Vanessa quickly behaved as if her father had never existed. Carol closed the photo album, strengthening her resolve. She needed to find her father. With awkward fingers, she opened her laptop and began searching. However, the name George Hunter was surprisingly common, and clues weren't immediately found. The next day, during her break at the hospital, Carol consulted her colleague Maria. "I would hire a detective," Maria offered practical advice. "My cousin does that work. His rates are reasonable." A week later, Carol met Maria's cousin Raymond. He was a veteran who now ran a small detective agency. "Tell me about your father's last workplace and the skills he had," Raymond asked while taking notes. "He worked for a construction company near Boston. As a carpenter. He was especially good at detailed woodwork," Carol answered. "He was a truly skilled craftsman. Any hobbies or special talents?" "He liked chess. And fishing too." Raymond nodded. "That's enough to get started. Give me about 2 weeks." 17 days later, after finishing her hospital shift, Carol visited Raymond's office. "I found him," Raymond smiled. "Your father is in a small town called Littleton in New Hampshire. He runs a workshop called Hunter Custom Woodworks." Carol's heart raced. "Really? Is he, well?" "Yes. He seems to be a respected craftsman in the area. He makes custom furniture and fixtures." Raymond handed her a folder. "Here's the address and information I've gathered." Carol gasped when she saw the photos. George had more gray hair, but the kindness in his eyes remained unchanged. He stood in front of a small workshop, smiling beside a handcrafted chair. "Thank you, Raymond," Carol expressed her gratitude. Tears welled in her eyes. That weekend, Carol took time off and headed to New Hampshire. During the 3-hour drive, her heart was filled with anxiety and anticipation. Littleton was a picturesque small town with quaint shops lining the main street. The sign for Hunter Custom Woodworks was modest, but beautiful wooden furniture adorned the showroom window. Carol opened the door with trembling hands. The sound of a bell echoed in the quiet workshop, and a man's voice called from the back. "Welcome, I'll be right there." Just hearing that voice brought tears to Carol's eyes. George Hunter appeared, brushing away wood shavings. He stopped for a moment, eyes widening. "Carol." "Dad." They embraced without words. 10 years of loneliness and love were contained in that hug. "You found me," George was the first to speak. His voice trembled with emotion. "It took a long time," Carol replied. "I wanted to see you." George closed the workshop and invited Carol into the small house next door. It was modest but comfortable. They talked until late into the night. Carol told him about the past 10 years, and about Vanessa's recent wedding plans and Olivia's situation. "Olivia has bruises?" Deep concern colored George's face. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I've seen them several times." "She seems frightened too," Carol answered. "Vanessa seems to have become an intimidating mother. I've heard her call Olivia a nuisance." George covered his face in anguish. "How terrible, my granddaughter." "That's why I have a plan," Carol said quietly. "Vanessa has asked me to babysit Olivia during the wedding. I was told not to come to the ceremony. And then I plan to bring Olivia here. And then I want to go to the wedding with you." "For what purpose?" "For the truth," Carol said with determination. "To show what real family means." On the morning of the wedding day, Boston was clear and bright. Vanessa's condominium bustled with hairstylists, makeup artists, and nervous bridesmaids. Carol arrived at 9 as promised and knocked on the door. Vanessa opened the door, already in the midst of getting her makeup done, with hair curlers in place. She looked slightly surprised at her sister's appearance. Carol was dressed a bit more carefully than usual, in a simple dress with her hair neatly arranged. "You're on time," Vanessa said. "Olivia is in her room. She hasn't had breakfast yet." "Good morning, Vanessa," Carol smiled gently. "Nervous?" "Yes, but I'll be fine." Vanessa's voice was calm, but her fingers trembled slightly. "Please bring me the mother-of-pearl earrings. They should be on the dresser." In the living room, Margaret was already sitting, perfectly dressed. "Carol, let me say this one more time," Margaret said in a low voice. "Absolutely do not come to the venue. You understand your position, don't you?" "Yes, Mother, I understand," Carol answered quietly. "I just want to be helpful." Carol headed to Olivia's room. After knocking, a small voice replied, "Come in." Opening the door, she found Olivia sitting by the window, wearing a white dress. It was her outfit as a bridesmaid. The girl was touching her hair, anxiously looking around the room. "Hello, Princess," Carol greeted her kindly. "You look beautiful." "Aunt Carol." Olivia's face brightened, and she ran over. "You really came." "I promised, didn't I?" Carol embraced the girl. "Looking forward to the wedding?" Olivia's expression clouded a bit. "Mom has been angry all the time. She yells at me too, saying something terrible will happen if I make a mistake." "It's going to be all right," Carol said gently. "Today will be a very special day. I promise." Carol looked at the girl's arm. She could see bruises hidden beneath the long-sleeved dress. She took out her smartphone and discreetly took several photos. It was part of the plan. The morning passed quickly. Vanessa's friends gathered one after another, and the room filled with laughter and excitement. Carol quietly took care of Olivia while watching the clock. Just after noon, Vanessa appeared in the living room wearing a magnificent wedding dress. She was truly beautiful. The pure white mermaid-line dress fit her slim body perfectly. Her hair was elegantly arranged in an updo, and a diamond tiara sparkled. For a moment, Carol was enveloped by complex emotions towards her sister. She had the right to be happy. But that happiness shouldn't come at the expense of others. Especially not Olivia. "Everyone, the limousine is here," someone announced. "Let's head to the venue." Vanessa turned to Carol. "The reception will last until 5. Bring Olivia back here by 6. "Understood," Carol answered calmly. "Don't worry. I hope it's a wonderful wedding." Vanessa looked slightly surprised. Carol's words seemed to contain no sarcasm. She nodded briefly and called for Olivia. "Do exactly as you're told," Vanessa said sternly to her daughter. "Don't drop the flower basket. And after the ceremony, you'll return with Aunt Carol." Olivia nodded silently, shrinking under her mother's stern gaze. When everyone had left, the condominium suddenly became quiet. Carol took Olivia's hand and said with a smile, "Ready? We're going on a special adventure." "Where are we going?" Olivia couldn't contain her curiosity. "First, let's get in my car. Then, it's a surprise." They headed to the parking lot and got into Carol's old sedan. As she adjusted the rearview mirror, she said to Olivia, "We're going to meet someone special. Someone who's very important to you too." "But won't Mom be angry?" Olivia's voice was anxious. "It'll be all right," Carol said with confidence. "This is a special surprise. Trust me." Carol drove the car north. She had planned ahead, arranging to meet George at a small cafe near Boston, about 15 minutes from the venue. Olivia silently watched the scenery outside the window, but eventually spoke up. "Aunt Carol, I'm afraid of Mom." Carol caught her breath for a moment, then gently asked, "Why are you afraid?" "Mom is always angry. When I make a mistake, she hits me badly," the little girl continued in a small voice. "Yesterday too, because I spilled a little juice on my dress." Carol's heart ached. Her resolve strengthened further. "Olivia, listen. You've done nothing wrong. It's wrong for adults to hit children. But Mom says I'm a bad child, so I need punishment." "No, that's not true," Carol put strength in her voice. "You're a wonderful child. Smart, caring, and brave." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the small cafe. Carol parked the car and smiled at Olivia. "Let's go." Entering the cafe, they saw a man sitting at a window table. It was George Hunter. He looked nervous, wearing a neat suit. When he saw Carol entering, he stood up. His eyes were fixed on Olivia. "Olivia, this is George Hunter," Carol said gently. "Your grandfather." "Grandfather?" Olivia looked up at George in confusion. "But Mom told me I don't have a grandfather." "Hello, Olivia," George's voice trembled with emotion. "I'm so happy to finally meet you." Strangely, Olivia didn't feel fear towards this grandfather she was supposedly meeting for the first time. Rather, she felt a sense of familiarity and comfort. She felt as if George's warm eyes were gently embracing her. The three sat at the table, and George pulled a small album from his pocket. "These are pictures of your mother when she was little." Olivia began looking at the photos with great curiosity. There were young Vanessa and Carol, collecting seashells on the beach, playing in a treehouse. "Mom was smiling this much?" Olivia said in surprise. "Yes, back then," George answered wistfully. "Everyone in a family should smile." "Why couldn't I meet you, grandfather?" Olivia asked innocently. George and Carol exchanged glances. Carol gently explained there were some problems among the adults. "But today is the day to make it right." They continued talking for about an hour. Olivia quickly warmed up to George, her eyes sparkling as she listened to his stories about woodworking. "Well, it's about time," Carol said, checking her watch. "We're going to an important place now." "Where?" Olivia asked. Your mother's wedding, Carol answered quietly. The three of us together. But Aunt Carol, Mom will be angry. Olivia exclaimed in surprise. Sometimes it's necessary to stand up for family, George explained gently. Today is a day we should be together as a real family. The three got into the car and headed to the venue. Olivia looked a bit anxious, but she seemed to be gradually reassured by Carol and George's calm demeanor. The venue was a ballroom in a luxurious hotel. The ceremony had already begun, and when they arrived, it was just the moment for exchanging vows. Let's go, Carol took George and Olivia's hands. Together, as a family. The three opened the large doors and quietly entered. The priest was just saying, if anyone has reason to object to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The entire venue fell silent at once. The color drained from Vanessa and Margaret's faces. All 200 or so guests focused on the trio who had entered. We do not object, Carol said in a quiet but clear voice. We just want to celebrate this special day with the entire family. There was absolute silence. Then, Olivia said in a small voice, Mom, I met grandfather. Vanessa's eyes widened in terror. Her gaze turned to George, and her face turned ashen. Carol slowly stepped forward and said, I want to witness my sister's special day with the entire family. The venue was wrapped in complete silence. Vanessa clutched Thomas Reed's arm and looked up at him. Thomas's expression showed confusion. After glancing back at his family, he looked at Vanessa again. What's going on? He asked quietly. Vanessa was at a loss for words. Margaret quickly stood up and approached Carol. What are you doing? Margaret was trying to control her voice, but anger was seeping through. You promised. Carol continued to stand quietly. George stepped forward to face Margaret. It's been a long time, Margaret. Margaret turned pale in an instant. George. I can't believe you're here. I came to meet my granddaughter, George said calmly, but there was steel in his voice. Thomas came forward. Although confused, he tried to maintain his composure. Excuse me, but who are you? I am George Hunter. Vanessa's father. Thomas's eyes widened in surprise. Father? I was told Vanessa's father had passed away. A murmur arose from the guests. They exchanged glances and began whispering. Carol stepped forward. Mr. Reed, it seems time to tell the truth. Her voice was calm but resonated throughout the venue. Our father is not dead. 10 years ago, he was forced to leave home by my mother and Vanessa. Vanessa, trembling with anger, shouted, That's a lie. Dad left on his own. Is that really so? George asked. His voice was tinged with sadness. Have you forgotten how you and your mother called me a failure and told me to never come back? Margaret shook her head violently. Everyone, this is not the place to expose family shame. Let's continue the ceremony. But Thomas remained still. He looked at Olivia and gently asked, Olivia, is this man your grandfather? Olivia nodded fearfully. She moved closer to George and held his hand. Mom never told me about my grandfather. But I met him today, and I found out he's a very kind grandfather. Thomas's face showed deepening confusion. He stared at Vanessa and asked, Why didn't you tell me the truth? Because it didn't matter. Vanessa raised her voice. It's in the past. Today is our day. Carol, please leave. Don't ruin everything. Carol took a deep breath and said quietly, Vanessa, this isn't just about the past. It's about Olivia's safety. The venue fell silent again. Thomas's expression changed. What do you mean? Carol took out her smartphone and approached Thomas. Please look at this. She showed him the photos of Olivia's bruises she had taken earlier. Thomas's face changed color when he saw the images. He looked at Olivia and gently asked, Olivia, is this true? Does your mom do this? The small girl nodded fearfully. Mom is always angry. When I make a mistake, she hits me. Thomas's parents came forward. Thomas's father, James Reed, was a partner in a law firm. With a stern expression, he approached Olivia and knelt before the girl. "Olivia, can you tell me the truth?" he asked kindly. "Don't be afraid. Mom says it's because I'm a bad child." Olivia's voice was small, but clearly audible in the silent venue. "But it hurts. I'm scared." Vanessa shook her head violently. "Don't believe it. She's lying. Carol put her up to this." Thomas's mother, Mary Reed, stepped forward. "Vanessa, calm down," she said coolly. "A child has no reason to lie." Margaret tried to intervene, but George grabbed her arm. "Enough, Margaret. It's time for the truth." Thomas approached Olivia and gently took the girl's hand. "It's okay, Olivia. No one will hurt you anymore." He turned to Vanessa. "Explain, Vanessa. She's just a problem child." Vanessa screamed. "She ruined my life. My career, my freedom, everything." Thomas's expression hardened. "Enough," he said quietly but firmly. "The ceremony is cancelled." "What did you say?" Vanessa asked in a trembling voice. "I have no intention of marrying someone who raises a hand against children," Thomas said resolutely. "Especially their own child." Thomas's father, James, intervened. "Ladies and gentlemen, I deeply apologize, but this ceremony will be postponed. Please leave your contact information at the reception desk when you leave. We will provide details at a later date." The guests began to stand up amid murmurs, quietly led out by Thomas's family who calmly controlled the situation. Vanessa collapsed to her knees. "Thomas, please, don't you love me?" "I do love you, Vanessa," Thomas said sadly. "That's why I hope you'll seek help. For Olivia's sake, and for your own." He turned back to Olivia and said gently, "It's all right, Olivia. You're safe now." Carol and George stood quietly on either side of Olivia. Carol said to Thomas, "We'll take Olivia home with us until her safety is assured." "I have no objection," Thomas nodded. "I'll be in touch later. Olivia's welfare is the priority." Margaret made one last attempt at resistance. "You have no right. Olivia is Vanessa's daughter. And she is my granddaughter," George said firmly. "If necessary, I'll seek protection from the court." Thomas's father, James, added, "I can support that. A child's safety should be the top priority." Vanessa collapsed to the floor and began crying. Margaret was also distraught. The truth they had hidden for years had been revealed in the most public way. Carol gently held Olivia's hand and said, "Let's go." The three quietly left the venue. On their way to the exit, Carol looked back and said one last thing: a real family cares for each other. It's bound not by blood, but by love and respect. Holding George's hand tightly, Olivia asked in a small voice, "Can we become a real family?" "We already are, Olivia," George answered gently. "Aunt Carol and I will always be on your side." On December 24th, as snow quietly covered the streets of Boston, Carol's small apartment was filled with Christmas warmth. Handmade decorations sparkled by the window, and modest gifts were arranged under a small tree. 6 months had passed since the wedding. Since that day, many things had changed. Carol and George had worked together to seek legal custody of Olivia. Surprisingly, Thomas's father, James Reed, had fully supported them as their lawyer. A new rhythm had been established where Olivia spent weekends at George's small house and lived with Carol on weekdays. "Grandpa, is this tree topper on right?" Olivia sat on George's shoulders, adjusting the star. "Perfect, little angel," George laughed. Happy tears glistened in his eyes. Carol smiled, watching this scene from the kitchen. Olivia's transformation had been remarkable. The girl who had been frozen in fear and tension was now full of smiles and curiosity. Her school grades had improved, and she had made more friends. The doorbell rang, and Carol took a deep breath. This was tonight's biggest challenge. When she opened the door, Vanessa stood there. She wasn't dressed in her former flashy style, but wore a simple sweater and jeans. Next to her, Margaret stood with an anxious expression. Come in, Carol said gently. Vanessa had experienced significant changes over the past few months. After the wedding collapse, she had temporarily lost herself in alcohol, but Thomas had persuaded her to get treatment. Although their engagement was broken, Thomas still remained involved in Olivia's life and paid child support. Olivia. Vanessa found her daughter and called to her. Her voice trembled. Olivia hesitated for a moment but approached her mother after receiving a gentle nudge from George. Hello, Mom. That's a lovely Christmas tree, Vanessa said. Tears welled in her eyes. I brought you a present. After awkward greetings, everyone sat at the table. Margaret initially sat in silence, but eventually spoke quietly. George, it's been a long time. Yes, Margaret, George nodded. It's taken a long time. Dinner began quietly, but gradually conversation started to flow. The wounds were deep, and complete healing would take much more time, but tonight was a first step. After dinner, it was time for Olivia to open her presents. Vanessa's gift was a photo album of mother and daughter. I want to create new memories, she said shyly. As Carol was cleaning up in the kitchen, Vanessa approached her. Carol. I want to apologize for that day, she said in a low voice. For everything. It's a long road, Vanessa, Carol said honestly. But family helps each other. Outside the window, snow continued to fall quietly. Carol looked around the living room. There was her family, imperfect but showing signs of healing. Watching Olivia sing Christmas carols with George, Carol thought, a real family isn't just about blood ties, but a gathering of people who have the determination to cherish each other and the courage to learn from mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but this was her family. And that was enough.